It's 4:32. Let's call a legislative meeting to order. I guess I'll start with introductions. Myself is Shane Blazer. I'm the chairman.
Tom Real, Alderman. I'm sitting in for Steve Cole tonight, who can't be here.
Thad Kubiszek, committee member, alderperson.
Jay Catnaugh, alderperson.
Melissa with the Daily Tribune.
Ashlyn Marty, I live on the river.
Nick Marty.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Adam Taken, Community Development.
I'm Elizabeth Whalen, a resident, but I'm also part of Bird City.
Sue Shields, City Attorney.
All right, thank you very much. So the first item on our agenda is to consider an ordinance prohibiting the feeding of waterfowl on city property. Mr. Terry, here to
Sure.
wherever you want. Stay there, sit up here.
The clerk, I believe, has just passed out a memo. Just because you haven't had an opportunity to go through it, I'm going to read it real quick. It is pretty short. The feeding of waterfowl on public property and in public parks results in a number of real and potential problems, including malnutrition for waterfowl, dependency, disease for the waterfowl, humans and pets, water pollution, environmental degradation, delayed migration, and costly management efforts. The city's made a significant investment in restoring the riverfront and the downtown for the public enjoyment. The feeding of waterfowl in these public areas is incompatible with public use and enjoyment. The recent and regular oiling of goose eggs, the Goose Roundup program, and the time spent is costly, time-consuming, and controversial. As a result, I recommend including language in the city's code book, likely in Chapter 25, to include banning the feeding of waterfowl on public property, right-of-way, and parks. I took this picture. Fortunately, it's black and white, but you can pass it around. If you walk down, just getting out of your vehicle or walking down that area, you instantly become the Pied Piper of waterfowl. That activity just clearly demonstrates that those birds are being fed. They're completely dependent on people, and that's one of the new areas in our parks that we just really don't want to have issues with waterfowl feces. We're having a tough enough problem getting vegetation to take with the river flows that we've had recently, but the ducks and geese down there continually eat away at the new sprouts, and we've replanted that a number of times. Again, compatibility problems with our 4th of July events and the people that want to use that bank when it's covered with bird feces. It's just a terrible health risk, and quite frankly, the types of things that people feed them are not healthy for the animals themselves. I do have a couple of handouts that are on the table, and I did print out some summary information that staff helped put together to help substantiate the fact that we've got some residents here and someone that represents Bird City. There's really no good waterfowl practice that includes the feeding of wild waterfowl in urban areas. And as a result, I guess we're asking the council to consider, or the committee to consider a recommendation to council to create an ordinance that would effectively ban the feeding of waterfowl in public parks, rights of way, and public property.
Committee, questions, comments?
What's kind of interesting is that there was one of the things with the Riverfront Upgrade Project, and even before Phase 1 kicked off, prior to me being on the council, there was an informational meeting at the Mead Inn with a representative of Supermass, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, but one of the things that he had suggested that if we had went forward and did Phase 1, that the gooses, and I know that the plural of goose is geese, but he said the geeses
are just naturally going to migrate to a different area and not really interact with where everybody is, like down by the old Elks Club building. So I guess I want to know when that's going to happen, or if we can get him to come down again from New York or wherever he was and explain where these geese are going to migrate.
Okay, audience? Yeah.
Only because I was at that meeting, I guess, if I remember the discussion, it was looking at alternative methods on improving that riverbank. One of the proposals was to have a much higher vegetation buffer along there. And one of the reasons you do that is because most geese are not comfortable with approaching a water body when they can't see. So that was one of the alternatives that was floated, so that was one of the ways to potentially deal with that. Ultimately, obviously, if you're out there, we went with the boulder edge, and then the stacked rock, which does not create that natural buffer. So that is one reason that they're not naturally going to just go off on their own. The other thing I would add is if you continue to feed an animal in a location, they're going to come to that spot regardless of what the vegetation is around it. So I think while that was one of the suggestions from the consultant at that time, because of how the park ended up final design, it went into plotting 100%.
I know the Martys have dealt with this for several years.
We're almost at 9 years now where we've lived, we're right adjacent to Demitz Park, and I would, again, I'm not a biologist, but I would argue that direct observation, the theory that the long vegetation has any effect is silly. That would have to be contingent on there being predation, which there is none. Okay, so there's no threat. They know there's no threat. And therefore, I've watched, last year when they were doing the whole project in the park, which was the entire summer, and that lawn was not cut all summer, and it's this tall, and you would see dozens of them with heavy equipment running 30 feet away from them, just chilling and hanging out. They have there's no worry whatsoever. And so the long grass thing, in the city of Wisconsin Rapids, where there's no predation, for them to be fearful of it, they've adapted. It's not a concern.
And we discussed that and, kind of talked to Bird City, Wisconsin, and, different things. And the long, kind of changing the environment. The geese are primarily attracted to lawn and cut grass. And, that is what they're feeding. The ducks, I think, are what people are feeding more. And they're, the geese tend to, leave that area and, kind of grace us with their with their presence all along the river and that. From Buren all the way, down to Nakusa. They're, they just move around. But the ducks are primarily what the feeding ban, we believe, will address, more so than the geese. But they are certainly a problem down along the park. I've been down there many times and walking along there and seeing people with big Ziploc bags of food or popcorn or whatnot, and it can lead to definite malnutrition, and that there's actually diseases that are caused in the ducks, and that where their wings are malformed. I understand that people like to have that interaction with wildlife, and we want to encourage that, but not in an artificial way like that. So
is Bird City in favor?
Yes, we are in favor of a feeding ban, for the wild birds, and that they really should be treated as wildlife, not as, kind of our pet project. So.
And Nick, do you think that might help?
Honestly,
You think you just
I
want to
personally
remove
have zero concern with, I'm just talking from my interest on our property,
Yep.
which is unfortunately, until, as I've said before, until an action or consistent action is taken with the Canadian geese, they're the problem. And I have I could shoo them out of my yard, I don't know how many times, over and over and over, and it'll be the same ones, over and over and over. The ducks, if it's not healthy for them, that's fine, I certainly respect that. I'm not looking to have that population be gone. They really don't cause a problem. The geese cause a massive problem, and they make a massive mess in very little time. And the park, again, that millions of dollars have been spent in, is what it, I mean, it's beautiful, it's great, but as we predicted, it's got a lot of goose mess in it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, ducks do their business in the water, and geese.
That is what my understanding is. So you don't have the residual, you just don't, you know, if they're in our backyard, it's really not a big deal. If a goose is in there for 5 minutes, it's a big deal. And if there's 50 of them in the bay, I mean, it's just, it's mess that, whatever, I guess, live where we live, but it's a mess that's not real fair to have to deal with.
Yeah, when I was a clerk, I talked to you about this issue for quite a while. Joe?
So one of the challenges with the geese is that the geese that we generally see and that are fairly domesticated, they're not transient anymore. And it's because they're being fed during the winter months, generally in the North Conservancy area, just south of Grand Avenue. People come out from the movie theater and dump their popcorn, and people come out and feed them. So they don't leave. They're not migratory animals anymore. They've become really accustomed to being around people. They're not afraid of people. You know, and so the feeding ban is the first step to help improve that. Now we have and continue to do an egg oiling program. You know, we're trying to encourage these birds to be migratory birds. Stopping on their way through is not an issue. But when they make a permanent year-long residence here, they can only do that when they're being fed. There's not natural food supply for them during the winter.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been down in these parks. Certain areas are really bad. I don't even like bringing my son down there because it's just layered all over in certain parts. Also, we've made huge investments in these. I'm definitely in favor of this. The one question I would have is enforcement. Is there going to be signs? How frequent are the signs going to be? Obviously, we'll probably have some posts and some announcement, but I just hate, this has been a part of the riverfront for years. I used to go down there and feed when I was younger. I hate to see people down there and get caught up and, you know, get a ticket or something. So we won't have enough signs. That would be my concern.
Yeah, I think with, you know, if the council takes action, we can sign it as deemed appropriate. And you'll notice in my memo too that there's, you know, an exception. What I'm suggesting is that it wouldn't apply to a situation where if we have a feeding area in the public zoo, if it exists and is specifically designated. So, you know, there are opportunities right now for people to enjoy the petting zoo and feed those animals. You know, that's certainly a possibility for certain waterfowl also to be incorporated in the zoo in an organized environment where that's, you know, where healthy foods are there. But as far as enforcement, you know, having things signed in that public awareness piece is critically important. The last thing you want to do is, let's say, waste an officer's time writing tickets. That should be a last resort. If we can do a good job of educating the public, that won't be necessary.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The zoo does have an area with waterfowl that you can put seed out to, among other animals as well. So.
I was just going to comment on the tool in the toolbox, right, in terms of oiling. Did you notice population decline over the years when we've done oiling and Roundup? You know, when we round them up, we take 60 geese perhaps out of the community, but how much does that get back to the migration?
So the oiling thing, I don't want to sound like, for any one, I mean, if you get a nest or several nests, that accomplishes that. But for every nest that you have, you've got 6 to 10 babies that come, you know, and then every one of them that don't get caught in the Roundup, that's where they're going to come back again. So it's just kind of, you know, when you do the Roundup, do the numbers go down for a period of time?
Temporarily, yeah.
But the problem is, it's not only that, there are massive migratory numbers that come through, and they love it here. And they love it here for like 2 months, not for like 2 days or whatever. They come and they hang out, and they more so will like invade your yard space, even more than the ones that nest. They'll come home and have a backyard full of them. And so I know we do the roundup. The roundup ends up in being, in a euthanization. My question I have, or one question I have, and even though it's only one population because it's only the nesting population, but when they come back in the spring, they're in pairs. They're strictly in pairs, and there's finite numbers of pairs that are nesting. And so we spend all this time trying to hunt through and dig out all these nests. When, if there was a way to focus on those pairs and just eliminate those pairs, wouldn't that then eliminate the whole problem versus trying to find and locate all these nests and oil them? And then I don't know, it just seems like it's a much fewer number of birds that would cover that population for the whole summer. And it is what it is. I'm sorry. I mean, it doesn't sound. I'm not trying to sound inhumane, but I'm just trying to be very logical in my mind about. Wouldn't that seem like a more sensible way to address the problem?
What we all know is that we're not unique in this problem.
Yeah.
And this is a problem not just in our central area along the river, it's communities from Oregon and California all the way to, it's all across. It's anywhere that the flyway is. The geese have come back in numbers and in droves, and where as we used to have much more hunting, and that has declined as well. And so we have we're having consequences. So I mean it's something we can do here, but it's something that is a larger part of a larger problem too. So I'm aware that the DNR they have their thoughts and things on it too. So and the UWSP has personnel people as well.
So there's one of the two of the other things that we're currently doing are oiling and the roundup. The roundup is not every year. We've tried to oil every year the last number of years. From the council, we've done every nest that we get on. Oiled is 6 to 10 birds. I think the average has been around 8 eggs on a nest. And those geese will come back to that location if they're allowed to nest there. So that's an important part of it. This year, for example, was real challenging because the river flows upset the nests, and if the eggs are destroyed, they relay. And we did go and do 2 oilings this year, but I will say I don't think that was extremely successful this year compared to some other years. So it is a management plan. It's not a remove them, exterminate type plan. And when they can't fly is when we do the roundup. And again, there are areas where we've talked to some folks where they've established a safe haven on their property, and we asked them about rounding up, and some have specifically refused, and in fact when they know we're doing a roundup, they'll throw corn in their backyard so that the geese will try to stay there knowing that we're not going to disturb them. I mean, it is part of an overall strategy though, and again, if those birds are not allowed to winter here, it ultimately will mean some fewer birds that are being a pest in the city.
I don't know, and this is a totally different concept, but I met with a gentleman who runs Wildlife Patrol LLC, which is just south of Rapids here, and really well versed on this species as well as other ones, but he was of the impression that there may be some sort of like a topical application, like a yard or grass application that would exist, that to their, whatever, it kind of makes them not feel good, obviously, but they don't come back to that spot again. We haven't reconnected again as far as that goes, but it's something I would definitely be interested in using on my own lawn. But the thought occurred, that again, maybe that could be something for our green spaces then, or parks and things like that. If that is a real thing, that would have a lot more, I think, bang for the buck than maybe a lot of these other approaches would have.
I'm kind of confused because in the statement it says the recent and regular oiling of goose eggs and goose roundup program is costly, time-consuming, and controversial. So I thought that this is like, it's a and/or. It'd be, if we approve the ordinance, then we're not going to oil anymore because it's costly, time-consuming, and controversial. But if we pass it, it sounds like we're going to still continue the costly, time-consuming, and controversial practice of roundup and oiling. So I don't understand.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's part of it, but again, if you're feeding the animals and you're encouraging them to stay here all year, you're potentially dealing with all of those animals that stay all year round, having to take care of those nests every year. I mean, if they're migrating and they're migrating through, it's one issue. If they're staying here and they're being fed, and we're having to try to manage it, it's just conflicting activities. You're feeding the animals on one side of the river, and then you're trying to oil the nests on the island.
Well, but I don't disagree with, if it's a case where not feeding the ducks and geese and whoever else animals, it solves the problem, then that's what I'm understanding that statement, the recent and regular oilings of goose eggs and goose roundup program is costly, time-consuming, and controversial. And I would assume, therefore, if we implement this new ordinance, then that will eliminate the need for oiling and roundup because it's costly, time-consuming, and controversial. Otherwise, why even interject that statement into this if we're going to continue? That's where I don't get it.
Well, I think if it's successful, it's a no cost. I think he's comparing the different strategies that have been used, and I don't think they're necessarily going to be eliminated, but perhaps there's less oiling.
Roundup might be once every 5 years instead of once every other year.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Well, but what I'm saying though is that why make the statement? If you could say we're involved with the roundup and goose oiling program, we haven't been totally successful, so we'd like to enter one more step into this to see if we can be successful. You know what I mean? Because it does seem like a mutually exclusive statement.
It isn't. So if it's interpreted that way, for the record, it's not mutually exclusive. It's not one thing or another. It's a combination of efforts. But what we're trying to do is manage that population by not encouraging them to stay and feeding this population.
But I mean, the statement could be our programs could be less costly, time-consuming, and controversial if we pass this ordinance.
Sure. Yep. I wouldn't argue with you.
Tom?
Yeah, and I've been in favor of a feeding ban for a long time, and it's I think about time that we take action. But I think at least initially, I think these things have to go hand in hand. Of the feeding ban, but also oiling, and that initially to make sure we're getting a handle on it. And if in a couple of years or whatever it be, or 5 years, that we feel that we to cut back on the oiling, or that we're not doing as much, maybe we'd have to keep doing it. But we cut back on doing it because we are hopefully accomplishing what this ordinance was before. But that to start with, I think you're going to have that we should look at doing both. Ban the feeding, but continue the the Roundup, the oiling and that. And, you know, like I said, maybe in a short time we'll decide we don't have to. But it may be an ongoing thing we have to stay with. Till we get them just so they move through. I mean, that's the intent. Is it, they've made their home here for so long, new ones, you know, maybe once if we can get them all to move, that, you know, maybe eventually the problem will go away, which I hope it would. It's hard, you know, but I just think we're gonna have to do both to start with. And I'm not even sure how much we were paying for the oiling off the top of my head.
Well, it's a couple days of staff effort. We used to have staff that kind of donated a boat. We're hiring someone now to assist us with that, so.
Entertain a motion if anybody wants to make one. I guess I'm not as passionate about it, but either way, I know this has been a discussion for quite a while, and I don't know if a feeding ban is going to assist in the parks and with the Martys, but I guess if everybody's in favor of it, I'm not opposed to trying something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I'll agree with you, Mr. Chairperson, that this is something that isn't glamorous for me, but on the other hand, I guess if it can help out, it can help out. But I don't have ducks in my yard, so
Yeah,
I can't afford to live on the river. So
I haven't had to deal with that issue either, and I've talked to Nick many times, and I know they've been dealing with it for quite a while, and you know, short of continually removing them in that program, you know, you've got to break that cycle somewhere. But I still think you have migratory birds coming in, and it's along the water. They're going to stop at our parks and our yards, and well, like you said, if we can get them to move on and not stick around, that might help.
I don't think it's a matter, honestly, I mean, I don't live anywhere near the river, but I enjoy the parks along the river. I walk along there frequently, and I think that it's, you know, wonderful to see the improvements that are being made down there, and the, you know, the different plantings, native plantings, and you know, I think that for all of us, you know, who want to use that area, I think making that improvement will have some impact in that, you know, just on being able to use that area, you know, whether because right now it's only usable for people who go down there to feed, almost, and you know, and there's people that fish, and you know, we walk, you know, along there, but it's really a mess down there, and it's, you know, kind of disheartening, and that to, you know, see it be, you know, see people just come with sacks of grain and things like that, and it just, it looks horrible. It doesn't represent our city very well, and that to see that grass just, you know, flattened and matted with feces and you know excess grain that's moldy and things like that. And I'm sure that our city workers don't really need to be having to deal with that either and stuff. But yeah, so.
well, you know, the long grass on the hill on the south side by the expressway, that I don't see any ducks or geese up there.
That's true. And I like that too.
Thoughts, committee?
I'll go with the flow, but I'm not going to make a motion. When that,
Okay.
It's up to you.
I'll make a motion to.
I know you've been passionate about
No,
or interested in this over the years, because I've seen debates in council in the
Yeah.
past years. And
I'll make the motion that we endorse, support the ordinance, feeding ban ordinance as proposed.
And I'll second it. So we have a motion and a second to create or consider an ordinance prohibiting the feeding of waterfowl on city property. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, motion carries. So we'll see how that works. All right, item number 3 is review and consider for adoption an amendment to the well abatement ordinance, moving to the program to Waterworks and Lighting Commission. Mr. Tate.
Well, I'll, I guess, kind of bow to the will of the committee on how much background you want. I've tried to, I sent out a memo later this past weekend that tried to give you more of the back history and why this is being proposed. Obviously in the referral itself, tried to provide some additional detail. And then obviously there's a draft ordinance. So if you need copies of any of that information, I do at least have copies of the memo that I did send out this weekend, in case you didn't see it in your email.
I did read it.
Oh, okay. So ultimately, if you're not familiar with it, in the 90s, I believe it was, the DNR basically stated if you have public water supply system and there are wells in that area, you have to adopt a private well permitting program. The intention behind it is to protect the public water supply. A lot of times Sandpoint wells, for example, what they are, they're a route for contamination to get back down into the groundwater. So that's where the city water comes from, so you want to make sure that it doesn't get contaminated. At the time, the council did move forward with adopting that ordinance, and the ordinance language just reads that the city of Wisconsin shall, or city of Wisconsin Rapids shall, do this program. Basically, what it boils down to, the recommendation is continuing the program, but moving it over to the Waterworks and Lighting Commission. Ultimately, it's their water system. The protection is for their main asset. That is the reason they exist. That's how they make the revenue to survive. And it hasn't always made a lot of sense why it's in a way farmed out to the inspection department. Obviously we do inspections, so maybe that was why that logical fit occurred, but more and more it's becoming a burden on our somewhat limited staff. There are some other priorities for the inspections department that have been looked at, things like a rental inspection program that would take a lot of time, a lot of administration. This program, while there is a revenue component with it, it's not like the city is paying for all of its costs. It's definitely not making the city any money by administering this program. And quite honestly, it's not a program that a lot of citizens like. So they have a tendency to look at it as, well, the city's just doing it to gain revenue. They don't make the connection back, again, to the fact that this is intended to protect the public water supply. And if it's coming from the utility, at least from the comments I've heard, that's a more logical fit. In addition, there is just the confusion. They currently have to, we send out letters, then they have to come into City Hall, they have to pay a fee, they have to schedule an inspection, and then they're given a water kit, and then that goes to Water and Light, and then somewhere in the magic, then they end up getting their paperwork. So there's multiple steps, there's multiple agencies involved. So even from a simplicity standpoint, being able to go to the utility, pay your fees, get your water kit, return it there, all under one roof. And then I guess kind of the final point, and I know I'm repeating a lot of what's in the packet, but the final point is it's very similar to the cross connection program that the utility currently has to administer. Basically, that program is making sure that backflow prevention is there so that contamination can't backflow into, again, the public water supply, making sure that equipment is not hooked up improperly, all of that. So they are on a cycle of having to do those inspections anyway. That leads to further confusion because then we say, well, you have to have a well inspection every 10 years, but Water and Light was just in my home last year doing the inspection. Well, that was an inspection, but it's not this inspection. And again, that just creates confusion and a lot of times distrust. So I did meet with Todd Weiler and Dale Schoeneman with Waterworks and Lighting last week to give them a heads up that this is something that's being floated. They basically just sat back and listened. So they haven't taken a formal stance that I'm aware of on whether or not they want this. Obviously their concerns are just like anybody else. It's work, which could mean staffing or cost to the utility. But again, ultimately, city staff's position is that that's more appropriate for them to be taking on that burden because it's their asset that's being protected. So ultimately, the change to the ordinance is very simple. It strikes where it says City of Wisconsin Rapids shall, and it basically puts in that Waterworks and Lighting Commission shall. We would work with them on a transition. but there's the ability to provide them access to our existing database. They could continue to use the MyGov program for the letters that are automatically generated every 5 years, that they can track the inspections, all of that they can be provided access for. They wouldn't have to build a system from scratch. And that can be done it's a built-in city cost because it's part of our inspection software, so there's not a additional cost to the city in working with them on that. So I guess that's where I'll leave it, and then I'll happily answer any questions that you may have.
It makes complete sense to me. Any committee?
I guess the only thing is that we don't have a statement from Waterworks and Lighting Commission. That'd be kind of a concern to rush, because it's something that we can always do. It isn't time sensitive, although I'm sure it's certain departments would like to let go of certain things for time constraints and everything else. But if we had to wait a month type of a thing to gather enough information to make a decision, I think that wouldn't cripple your department, if you've already been doing it for X number of years or whatever else. So.
Yeah, and if I may, the reason we're approaching it this time of year is obviously, for the most part, we're done with 2019 wells. We still have probably 50 of them out there that we'll be trying to get closed up before they get closed down for the year. But that would allow us, give us 4 or 5 months to work with them again on that transition, so that once spring kicks in. So a delay, although I never like delays, but yes, is it the end of this program by doing that? No, I think there's still time to get things lined up. I mean, if I was a betting man, I'm not going to assume Waterworks and Lighting is going to come up and say, absolutely, we'll take this program. I'm guessing that they're going to say, we don't want it. But that's just my assumption.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, even if they come back and say, they don't want it, it's something that we should probably do anyway. So, if delaying it.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry to cut you off, Mr. Chairman, but in terms of, what we want to do is create something that transitions very well. And I'm sure, Adam, you've put together, and you're a person of character that would definitely be able to, see to it that a transition would occur. And in the long run, does it make sense? Yeah, but sometimes if we got the cart in front of the horse, which I think we've done a lot of times, that we have a poor transition and then it falls to, mud. And so, by waiting a month, to get everything clear and to find out, negotiation avenues, I don't disagree with doing this. It could be, there's a lot of, what would you say? Overlap that could be with the utility, but again, there might be concerns that we don't know about, with the PSD, and I don't know, it's unknown unknowns that we don't know.
Yeah, and obviously there's always the possibility to put in effective date within the ordinance, that effective as of April 1, 20.
Were they aware that this was on the agenda tonight?
I sent over the agenda to Todd Weiler yesterday, so he's aware of it. I warned him that it was coming forward in my conversation with him last week.
Yeah, I would have anticipated if they were aware that, knowing that they might end up with this program, that they would have had a thought or representation here. I'm not opposed to waiting, till the next legislative meeting to wait for an opportunity for them to give us our input, but I agree with Jake, they're not going to volunteer.
No. Yeah.
Well, depending on
And the Adams Department is not going to volunteer to keep it either.
Well, depending on how item 6 goes, this might not come back for a while.
Well, and your report is not going to council tonight,
Right.
so it wouldn't go to council for another month at least anyway, so I don't know whether you would bring it back to legislative again, or...
Yeah, I think it can come back here if they want. It doesn't matter. I guess, I've in all fairness, if they want to, if we can give them an opportunity to speak their concerns if they have it. But to me, it makes complete sense. This, like Adam said, it is protecting their water system, which is ours. We own the utility, but it makes sense that this is all kept in-house there.
Yeah, with all due respect, if I had a notice on something, I wouldn't probably be able to.
Right. Yep.
Well, and I met with them last week. But I sent the agenda.
Oh, okay. So-
Just as a reminder that it was coming, to just to make sure that they were aware.
Yeah, I
it was
think
formally.
we can give an opportunity to give their opinion and concerns, but
So I'll make a motion to postpone this till the next legislative committee meeting.
yes, so I'll second that. Got a motion and a second to postpone it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. No, that's fine. Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, number 4 is review and discuss policies relating to taping and broadcasting city meetings. So yeah, this item is regarding, I think there's controversial or potential controversy with the last HR meeting, and I think we just need to get a clear understanding of when meetings are going to be taped and or what meetings are going to be taped and when, if they're going to be aired or how we're going to air them. And I guess my opinion is that all city council and committee meetings are taped and broadcast on a regular schedule, without exception.
City council, standing committees, and the legislative committee.
Right, I thought that's the motion I made to get it on this agenda, and, I mean, does it change, or it gets adjusted after the fact?
Yeah, so what an agenda really, as long as we're not like trying to pull something over the taxpayers, but I mean, the way that it says discuss policies relating to taping and broadcasting city meetings, so we can say, Parks Commission meetings, or we can say that's optional,
Right.
but yeah, we can absolutely. So then, yeah, I guess with discussion, Ms. McKenna, for including legislative committees, standing committees,
Yeah.
and city council meetings, without a doubt. And is there a timeline we want to try? Do we want to set an arbitrary timeline, or do we want to just say language that says in a timely fashion or in a timely manner?
Didn't Tyler send out an email saying it could take up to 24 hours?
That's absolutely fine. I mean,
So I think
24
within
hours.
24 hours, within 24 hours, that needs to be posted in.
Vacation was brought up, if staff happens to be on vacation, who posts the videos, and what if they're out a week? So, I mean, I could even see allowing some amount of time in there. I think with this specific meeting, it was up and then it was not up, and that was kind of the controversy. So just that it gets up and stays up too, whether it be within 3 days even, would take care of that.
Well, I'm not
issue why it originally came.
You're a computer guy, so how, in terms of what does it take to upload a video to like a YouTube platform?
It depends on the platform. So when our city council meetings are streamed live on Facebook, that recording, after the live recording is done, stays within the Facebook page. Now, while they're recorded with city equipment, that's going to be a recording that's on the computer or the system that's going to need to be uploaded to YouTube, and that all depends on, they can post it right after the meeting, or they can do it when they come in the morning, depending on what their schedule's like. But depending on the platform, Facebook, it's going to be there and stay there. It's automatically how it works, whereas YouTube, it'd be manually uploaded. And other city platforms would probably be similar to the YouTube one, where it would have to be manually uploaded.
How long does a 2-hour, say our council meeting was 2 hours, X number of gigabytes or whatever, in your opinion, for a high-speed internet connection, how fast or how slow would it take to upload to YouTube?
Matter of minutes. I mean, as far as loading time, yeah, it doesn't take long at all.
Okay.
The community media group proposed a policy on this. Was that distributed to all of you?
I don't think so.
Andy, I'll have Andy's share that with you.
Oh, that'd be good.
And it basically covers public meetings, when they'll air. It basically covers what was just discussed here. Standing committees, and any other committees that might get added. And then there might be a request to, let's say it's a commissioner board or a committee that the chair or the mayor or the council wants recorded for a particular reason. That can be handled on a case-by-case basis. So one of the other committees or commissions. And then it addresses a meeting editing policy and a retention of the public meeting media, which is also a question, how long we can retain these. I think there's maybe some lack of clarity around the historical process, and that was that YouTube was our platform, our channel for all of our meeting information. And so Yeah, exactly what Alderperson Catnoss said. They record it when it's on Facebook, unless the meeting drops, which consistently happens. It happened with that HR meeting. It was split into 2 segments. The council meetings occasionally do that too. It's not a problem, it's just that people need to know there's multiple parts to those when they're uploaded to social media. As far as the Facebook piece, within 24 hours, because they have to produce the video. They don't just download it, upload it, it's recorded on their system. So that's why they said no sooner than 24 hours would be when they would publish it, but it would be published as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair.
Yeah. Can we get a copy of that memorandum? Can you?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I thought Andy was going to share it, so
Yeah, we don't.
he can share it with
Yeah, that'd be great. And then, do we need to formally adopt that policy, Sue, or is it something, maybe we should review it? And this is it,
Yeah, I would
or-
say that. I mean, there might be parts of it that you would be considered policy that you know, that you're saying, and then, you know, maybe some of the details might be more of a policy for that. But I'd have to take a look at it too and see what's.
So maybe we should
I think you come back to definitely to look
bring it
at
back on the
Come back next month.
meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, next
Or-
month of the end.
Yeah.
Andy may want to speak to it. I mean,
Yeah,
he
he does.
it's
Yeah.
based upon his peers and what his
His
experience was in the city of
experience,
Oshkosh, so not to say that can't be different here.
Well, I think the ultimate authority lies with us, with being the council. So,
What we want, no.
yeah, we need to make sure that we look at this letter of memorandum.
That's what
Absolutely.
we want. Yeah.
Exactly.
But
So
yeah. Go ahead. I was gonna say, yep.
I'll make a motion to postpone this item to the next legislative committee.
And I'll second it. So I have a motion and a second to postpone this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion to postpone was approved. Next item is a referral from Alderperson Rayone to study all committees, commissions, etc. regarding their duties, number of members, whether members are residents of Wisconsin Rapids or not, meeting dates and times. Mr. Rayone. I know it's a mouthful. This I'm sure is going to be discussed over.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I don't expect, you know, us really to make a decision tonight.
Right.
So that's for sure, because there's so much to look at that I'd like us to look at anyway. And basically, I don't know that I really necessarily myself had, other than make some comments, you know, set things to throw out there, maybe others than food for thought. Sue, I don't know, is there anything you got
Yeah,
first, I guess?
started, I had surgery and then last week, and so I wasn't able to get to this until today, and I do have, started cutting and pasting between our ordinance, the state statutes, different parts of our code, trying to get every single one, and then putting it in a simple form. What is the membership? How are they appointed? What is the term kind of getting at? Responsibilities, when do they meet? If this is rough right now, I could hand it out, or like I said, it needs to be kind of culled a little bit in some areas and then some stuff added to it, but I wasn't sure what, you know, I can definitely finish this up in the next day or two and get it out to you, and then I don't know what you want to do with that information, but then at least you'll have it all complete, and then that whether you're determining whether some are necessary or not necessary, or changing membership or anything, I guess, then it's all there for you and you can see for each one, but
Yeah,
still kind of tracking down information on some of them.
I'd like to see what you do come up with, but I guess in there with that too is,
Whether they're
which state statutes
Right, yeah. Mhm.
actually say,
Right.
are there state statutes that says who has to be on certain committees?
Right.
Are
Whether
there
they're
certain ones that
statutory or
say
not, right.
citizens, that citizens have to be?
Right, and I have that in here
Or
whether.
aldermen
Yeah, whether
can
they're an
be,
older
or-
person, whether you have to be actually a resident of the city, or
right,
versus just citizen, that means a citizen of the state.
And there is one that has been, now, I don't know when we started doing it. It might have been when the council reduced in size. I don't know off the top of my head. Is actually, and I have looked at a couple other communities. Actually, it started from seeing some on the cable system. Turned into, and I haven't done it a whole lot lately. I don't know. I just got out of the habit of it, I guess. I just went on the computer to look up to see what they had for committees, standing committees, commissions, and who made up these, made up the committees. But one that has, is finance and property seem to be too broad to me always. That finance, I thought, should have been a standalone by itself. There is one that actually, as I understand it anyway, that has a capital improvements and street maintenance committee, a standing committee, which it'll be the duties of this committee to recommend the purchase, sales, leasing, real estate by the city and recommend the use or disposition of vacant or unutilized city-owned real estate, to review certain plats, to locate and recommend acquisition of areas for municipal purposes. But it gets into such purposes to include the requirements for expansion of city street system and improvements. Therefore, to conduct hearings on official map proceedings and street and alley vacations, to investigate and recommend to the council capital outlay improvements programs for public works. So it kind of ties in where I thought it should be, and my thoughts have been that the property should be more like with public works. This, they don't call it that in this sense, but and finance deals with finance. That's where the money is. And that the decision or recommendation actually comes from somewhere else. And that in this case that or it could be that finance, I guess, has the purse strings, but
Yeah.
that's the property or that type of stuff or work that would be done as a recommendation. And okay, now find the money. Where can we get it? Do we shift money or for this, from this project to that project to do or whatever? So there are some things that would like to look at. I'd like input. I think who has to be on certain committees, but I think that along with it, as long as I'm thinking about it, is one that has struck me by looking at some of these, this here, but also I think of maybe some instances that we've had ourselves of qualifications. Actually, you don't. It's not to rule people out, but some of these, and I'll just go back to last month where we had our Board of Zoning Appeals, Zoning Board of Appeals. Things that, things that gets pushed down, or just basically comes as a, we did this type of thing, The council doesn't really have a say other than maybe to send it back or something, but it's and I'm not saying that that it's been wrong all the time, but in my mind I question that a lot of the decisions are made on, feel good type of thing, and is it really that the law backs it up, or maybe something that, I don't know why not, but legally is that what we should be doing? And that's why I think, and some of these commissions and that, I think some type of what the state again says, maybe for qualifications or what they rely on as far as state statutes and that type of stuff, to be involved in that. So I think it's, I'm not looking at upset and overturn the whole cart, but I think that it's an opportune time, and I also, along with it is the number of people on a committee. I've thought personally myself that 3 is too few, but I understand the reasoning for it because our council went so low in people. And you look at surrounding communities do have more than us, and I know again last month or the month before, whenever I supported the increase in number, but I didn't want to go to the at-large position. But there again is I think something that maybe should be revisited to changing the council size, but at a redistricting type of level to do it at. And because I look at some, again, some of these and such as Wausau has, and I think these are fairly up to date, or this one is anyway, is they have 5 on a committee, and I believe the council has 11. You know, obviously Wausau's a bigger community, but on the same token, that, you know, I think, to me, I think 3 is too few. You know, again, 5 would be a good number, but you only have 8 council people.
Right, and 5 now would be a form of the council.
So it's
you know.
and then again, it depends how many, you know, if you did change the number of committees, especially that type of thing too. So I think some of that could fall hand in hand on what you'd have with numbers on, to be on, to change the numbers. But I think it's time that we take a look at, or I'd like to take a look at anyway, to the duties of that the committees have, if there's some that should be changed, or who's on some of these, and really, does the state say they should be residents of the city or not, and that type of thing. So it's just, I think I'd like us to take a look at it. I know I've mentioned it different times, and I did turn in a referral, whatever, a couple months ago. And it is, you know, tonight we're here, and it's, you know, they actually, looking through that, they actually formed a dog park committee, which is like an offshoot of, from, you know, special committee from the Park and Rec, but it had 2 from the Park and Rec and 5 citizens member, plus the Park and Rec chair I was on it, I think is what, at least I got written down here. So it's in the planning commission in this one of these had the mayor, the public works director, chair of Park and Rec, which is an alderperson, and another alderperson, and 3 residents. So it had 7, or I think our planning might have 7 on the top of my head, somewhere in that.
6, I think we got 6.
But there's 1 alderman, so I think there could be a little, but that may include the 6, I don't think. It just seems an odd number, but whatever that is. But it's just, you know, so just be some other food for thought of, you know, it somewhat gives a little bit of different makeup of, you know, from people from the city, the council, and citizens. You know, staff, council, and citizens, which, you know, in different numbers, basically. I think about the same number of people, but in a different way to set it up. So it's just, so, you know, not to drag this out and do a lot of talking here, because, you know, I don't have a big plan to throw out at you, but I just, I'm glad it was put on the agenda for be able to say a few things. And
Yeah, I think we should leave it on our agenda until we have a resolution on whether or not we make some changes, a lot of changes, or no changes.
Or no
But I think
changes,
it
right, yeah.
should be keep this item on here. But, you know, I'm kind of curious, and you'd be the only one to know, and I don't know, you know, did we lose anything from, because it was prior to any experience I've had in government, from all the committees that we had before to what we have now, if we've lost anything in that transition, you know? I don't know, you know, and I'm glad to see we have this committee.
you know, good or bad, I think what was lost was different ideas
More discussion.
by fewer people, not, you know, that just from 19 to 8 that it went from to, you know, so it just there were different thoughts that were there, and I think the numbers went down, and I think the committee size is that then you're restricted on, I think it gets restricted on thoughts and ideas that come out. I think that's a big, probably maybe a bigger part than the actual total reduction in council size, but it's the numbers that are on the committee that chances are of having disagreements or different thoughts aren't there with the fewer that you get. You know, it depends a lot on the setup of the committee.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions. I guess I'd have to see a more formal plan or proposal before I made any comment. The one thing that you're just talking about recently, as far as possibly expanding committees or numbers of members on committees, is like, for example, I'm not on this committee, but I'm here and I can still, I'm doing it right now, participate and put input. And when we talk about residents and non-council members, I mean, there's sometimes we don't even have a crowd that comes to participate, so expanding it, I don't know. But yeah, I guess I would comment more when there was like an official proposal or plan.
And your standing committees would be the council, council
Right.
members. It'd be your commissions, boards, or something that to include other people. But looking at some, at least as I understand it, is some of these I think do include more council members on some of these other commissions too. I'm willing to look at something like that even too. But that's not doesn't have to be, isn't that I'm not set in stone on it.
So yeah, let's just leave this as an item on our legislative committee agenda, and then
Yeah, I'll finish this out and send it out, and then you'll have the information that are showing on.
The one thing that I would suggest is we could also look at not necessarily trying to figure out what we kind of want to do, but maybe we could mirror what very successful communities are doing too, because the Village of Whitefish Bay or the Bayside or Wanakee or different places, and some of them are villages. Well, villages and cities are very, 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 very similar. The only difference is the mayor versus the village president. But as far as committee membership goes and referrals and boards and commissions, it's very similar. So why don't, instead of reinventing the wheel, let's just take someone else's great idea and implement it.
And just to go along with that, that's why there were a couple communities that I did look at and went on a computer and went through what there were, and that there are others to look at too, as you mentioned. I just looked at a couple within central Wisconsin and actually copied some stuff off of the computer of what their committees, who makes them up, the duties are, and that type of stuff. And those they do reference or maybe more so in your commissions and that, but state statutes and that type of, and qualifications, your ordinances that you looked at. Because I think that's the thing too of actually what duties, to look at, to make sure commissions or whatever aren't assuming maybe what their duties are versus.
Correct.
Maybe it should be somebody else's commission or something, whatever.
Exactly.
But you're right, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mayor?
I just had to that end, I think there's some duplication in some areas, like the wastewater, and I'm sorry, I talked about some of the wastewater treatment commission and the public works committee. I think the public works committee, in many respects, could or should be dealing with those matters from that commission in particular. And I think industrial development commission is another example of one that probably doesn't have a lot of relevance today. Redevelopment authority, I question whether or not we should think about more of a community development authority. And again, taking some of the other good examples, there probably are some. So I think, relevance to today's sort of issues, I think is a big question, as well as what are some areas where we could probably have some citizen involvement that addresses some of the bigger concerns we get. I think residents would like to serve in areas when their scope of duties are really defined, as opposed to look at ADA advisory. It doesn't seem to have a scope defined. So I think this is a good exercise to maybe just clean up some of those, and if there are some good reasons to add, I think it'd be a good thing.
Sounds good. Do we need a motion or anything?
I'll make a motion to postpone this to next legislative committee meeting.
Second. Tom seconded. So we have a motion and a second to postpone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The last item is consider amending the number of items needed to trigger a legislative committee. And I think the original discussion was 3 or 4-ish, and my concern was, what if we have one important one that we want to take up? But I'm kind of the point where I'm feeling maybe personally that we shouldn't have a number that triggers. You know, it could be 1 or 2 items, and you know,
We have to call the chair.
Chair, yeah.
And have
And-
new chairs.
yeah, and then somebody says, hey, we've got an important thing we need to take up, and it's only one item, let's do it.
And I'll just throw in the 2 cents that I wish I would have thought of when we were talking about the item before, because actually, you know, legislative, but maybe to tie in with something else too, but, you know, maybe it should be looked at as a standing committee. And that if there are items, you bring it up, it doesn't, you know, your meeting date is going to be, but you're not going to meet unless there's an agenda.
Sure,
You know,
Because I'm looking at,
because that's what I saw in one of these also too, is the meeting date is there, but there's not a meeting till an official agenda's out.
correct.
and I struggle with
You know what it is, but if you
HR
don't-
doesn't seem to have a home for a time, and so I'm leaning more towards, seems like Tuesdays make a good meeting night for people, and so, you know, I like the first Tuesday, but it's finance and public works, you can't cut it. You know, it's not realistic to have it earlier, and I'm not a fan of like morning or afternoon meetings because most of us can't make it. So I kind of been leaning now, thinking maybe that second Tuesday, and maybe that could be a legislative committee night. If the
If
second
need be.
Tuesday, yeah, you know, it's unfortunately Tuesday before council, but, you know, we can meet that night or that day, and could try to lean towards HR that day, and we can think about that. But yeah, I just think that I don't want to see, you know, oh, we have one item that we really need to take up, or we're trying to fish for a couple more items to have a meeting. You know, if it's important, let's have a meeting and
How
get it
about,
done.
because the way that we're kind of looking at this, how many items needed to trigger? How about, you know, if we flipped it around like you're suggesting that if we have an important one, we'll, you know, put it on an agenda and tackle it at that time. But what if there are 4 items that are lingering? What triggers an automatic meeting, or how many do we need before it creates an automatic meeting? That might be, you know, more of the discussion. Not so many how many do we need to create one, because we could create one with 1. But if we got 3,
That's kind of what I was thinking. If we had 3 items, then you definitely need to have a meeting. You can't hold it off, maybe. But we could have one at 1 though.
But I do like Tom's suggestion that, you know, having it as standing committee, and if that's the case where you're looking at making HR on the second Tuesday, you know, like I said, unfortunately, it's a week before council, but, you know, we could also have a follow-up special HR meeting or a follow-up special legislative meeting prior to the council meeting, you know, like what we're doing tonight. But that standing committee aspect, that if there's nothing on the agenda, then you don't have it. Yeah.
You know, to me, it's an important, is an important committee.
Correct.
But if there's not an item, you don't have to meet.
That's right.
But if there is an item, you should meet.
Correct.
Absolutely. Jake, you got something?
All right. One quick question. What's the current language? I know this one said 3 or 4. What is it currently?
Well, it was more, I think, at one of the first meetings, it probably said next meeting, and I think you just had a general discussion of, well, when are we gonna do it? And then someone just said, well, you know, when we get 3 or 4, and so that's what I put in the minutes,
Yeah.
we'll meet, so it wasn't really like.
So there isn't no official. So we're talking right now about making official language. I mean, I 100% agree with all the. I think the chair should be able to call a legislative meeting for one item, and I think that's a good idea too. I mean, but yeah, I think there should definitely be some official language behind it.
Yeah, well, especially since like Tom's referral, if we get into that, we only have that item, you know, I think we should tackle it and have a meeting and start pursuing that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that, you know, if somebody approaches me and then we have an item that you feel it's important, let's have a meeting and address it.
Absolutely.
Or a referral from council or city staff has something important that we need to address and resolve, or, you know, like swell abatement or this well permit type, something that needs to be addressed and want to move forward. Let's have a meeting, and maybe short, may not.
Right.
I like it.
Do we need a motion?
Unless we want to make it actual standing committee, but otherwise, make a motion to postpone to the next legislative.
Here we go. All right.
Somehow we should have enough items.
We've got enough items for next month.
I hit the 3 minimum already. So that's
Yeah, we're fast.
So we have a motion and a second to postpone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On. So our next item is the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned at